Now let's talk about Yemen. A lot of important stuff happening here. The first is that Saudi Arabia used the Israeli NSO group's Pegasus spyware to target the phone of a UN investigator into war crimes in Yemen. Now, I believe this investigator was heading the commission that Saudi Arabia was actually able to kill through bribes and by pressuring other countries. But this is relatively significant that you have Saudi Arabia bold enough to target the UN investigator here, and we'll see what happens. But I'm guessing not much will come of this. As much of a scandal as this really has been, what happened with the NSO group, and the U.S. was upset enough, particularly because 11 of its diplomats, I believe diplomats are, staff for its embassy in Uganda, were targeted with this. Now, it's not clear if that came from the Ugandan government or maybe the Rwandan government, which also had access to Pegasus. But nonetheless, the U.S. did sanction the NSO group, and it's caused a lot of financial problems for the NSO group. It hasn't been insignificant. And so Saudi Arabia doing this, should be a major story that they're trying to spy on an international investigation. Certainly Assad in Syria doing something like this would draw a major rebuke. But even the Biden administration that, claim to want to treat the Saudis like the pariah state they are not taking any action against Saudi Arabia for this. And I don't expect them to. Maybe the most unfortunate thing happening here, this from the BBC, Yemen war funding crisis, UN forces UN to cut food assistance. This is through the World Food Program, and it's going to reduce food assistance to 8 million people in Yemen because it's running out of funds. And so, of course, you have this absurd UN building in, New York City, and so much unnecessary wealth surrounds that thing. And, the different diplomats and all the other UN offices and everything like that. But then they can't come up with money to feed poor, starving Yemeni people. It's just absolutely unbelievable. Also, is the United States, UAE, Saudi Arabia, UK, Germany, Italy, France, even throwing the Qataris earlier in the world, the Moroccans, Egyptians, have all been involved in, profiting and waging this war that has wrapped up, hundreds of thousands of deaths at this point. And, when we're talking about just feeding the poorest and the most starving children in Yemen, these countries can't come up with a fraction of the amount of money that they use to blow Yemen to smithereens to feed the people of Yemen. It's just absolutely disgusting. And so from January, affected families will barely get half of the daily minimum ration from the UN agency. And so they're not even getting the minimum amount of food that the UN says that people need. This is 8 million families. We're not talking about, just a couple 100,000 or anything like that. We're talking about a country of, 20 plus million people, and significant numbers of them either having, being on the brink of famine conditions, being completely reliant on UN aid agencies for food, and then not even getting half of what they need. So their kids are probably going to starve to death anyways. Now, the Biden administration promised to end support for Saudi Arabia's offensive operations in Yemen, but what do you know, that didn't happen, and Saudi Arabia is laying waste to Yemen. This from December 6th, Jason Ditz at antiwar.com. Saudi coalition launches 47 airstrikes against Yemen's Marib, and they say that, about 100 Houthis were killed in Marib, and, they're just raining down airstrikes on this place every day. Hopefully a lot of the civilians are out and they're not killing a lot of civilians, but essentially all the reporting we get is just Houthi fighters die, and that seems pretty unlikely. Now, in response to the major Saudi bombing that we have in Marib, the Houthis carried out a couple of strikes in Saudi Arabia, this on December 6th into 7th, and in response, Saudi Arabia carried out a pretty large airstrike campaign on the Houthi on the Yemeni capital Sanaa, where most of the people live. This would be like somebody bombing Washington D.C., and so it's causing a lot of damage. It's not exactly clear how many people are dying in all of these strikes, but it's been 7 almost years of war now in Yemen, and these strikes add up and continue to damage the infrastructure of Yemen. This from December 6th, Jason Ditz at antiwar.com. Yemen shuffles central bank leadership as currency crashes. The central bank is trying to shoot for a 530 to 1 ratio with the US dollar, but the practical ratio, the dollar, the Yemeni rial trades for 1700 to 1 with the US dollar. And so this is just goes to show how poor Yemen is. And a lot of this is because of the Saudi, I think, has been trying to cheapen its burden in the Yemen war by taking a lot of they're printing up Yemeni rials and then dumping them into Yemen. Now, maybe this is just economic warfare and currency manipulation of the absolute worst kind to do to the absolute poorest of people. But it could also, again, just be Saudi Arabia looking for a cheap way in this war. And rather than paying off people with, reals that they have to buy in dollars, they're just printing new reals for absolutely nothing and flooding the market, and this is really hurting the Yemeni economy. All right, so there's going to be a very important debate that I think will come up after the beginning of the year, and it's going to be around Patriot missiles for Saudi Arabia. According to the Saudis, the Yemenis, since 2015, have carried out 431 missile strikes and 850-something armed drone strikes within Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia has countered this. They claim that 59 civilians had died in that time. I don't know if I believe that number. And it could be also that it's in part the air defense systems, the Patriot missiles land on somebody's house and, kill people that way. But they claim 59 of their civilians have died in these attacks. Of course, massive numbers of, Yemenis have died, far more than 59 from the Saudi just unbelievable bombing of all kinds of targets in Yemen. But anyways, they're looking for Patriot missiles, and they're going to use those to intercept drones and missiles coming in from Yemen. And so these are critical to Saudi Arabia being able to wage this war, because if Saudi Arabia can't defend itself against Houthi missile attacks, then, its people and its assets could be targets for the Houthis. And the Houthis are asking for talks right now, and so this could call for, or this could push Saudi Arabia to have to engage in meaningful talks with the Houthis, not just one way maximalist demands. Oh, the Houthis won't meet it. Damn, aren't they impossible Iranian puppets? I guess we can't talk with these people anymore. If they don't have the Patriot missiles to defend their country, they may have to engage in serious negotiations with the Houthis, where the Houthis, would ease up only if they're getting enough from the Saudis to, end the war, hopefully. It would be, I guess, the hopeful outcome there. And so I expect this debate to happen at some point, that Senators Paul Sanders and Mike Lee, at the very least, will introduce a bill to try to block any sale of Patriot missiles to Saudi Arabia. And, we'll see what happens from there. But I think this is going to be an important debate that comes up after the first of the year, when Saudi Arabia runs out of Patriot missiles and seats new ones. The U.S. claimed that the Navy seized 2 large caches of Iranian weapons that were heading towards Yemen. They say that in November of 2019 and February of 2020, they got 171 surface-to-air missiles, 8 anti-tank missiles, as well as land attack cruise missile components, anti-ship cruise missile components, thermal weapons optics, and other components. I don't know if they've actually turned this up, and I don't know if they could prove that this was actually going to the Houthis. If they intercepted an Iranian ship full of weapons, well, that's going to happen. If the U.S. wasn't the world empire, I'm sure China and Russia would be seizing U.S. Shipments of weapons going different places or something like that. But we're the world empire, and so nobody could seize or touch our weapons. But we seize these Iranian weapons. It's possible that these were going to the Houthis. It does sound like weapons that they could possibly use. The Houthis have, attempted cross-border and have, made progress in southern Saudi Arabia. And so maybe in that context, like anti-tank missiles or surface to air missiles to shoot down maybe helicopters or something like that could be useful. I'm not sure how either of those weapons would be at all remotely useful to preventing the Saudi bombing campaign of Yemen, though. And so I somewhat suspect maybe that they would be heading to, say, Assad in Syria, as they, these are, I guess, maybe not air power, but, anti-tank missiles could be used against like Al-Qaeda forces or something like that in the Idlib province. So it's not exactly clear where these weapons were going, but that's what the U.S. is saying. It could be used on propaganda on multiple levels. For the Saudis, it's going to be justification for why the U.S. needs to sell them weapons, even though Biden said he wasn't going to do it. For the otherwise, the Iranians, this could be, oh, look at their terrorist activity in the Middle East. We can't negotiate with them on the JCPOA because, they support the Houthis in Yemen. Aren't they terrible? And, that's usually enough to convince any Americans to boo and jeer the Iranians and then any talks or potential diplomacy with that country. Yemeni commander, backed by Saudi Arabia, was killed by the Houthis during fighting in Marib. Not clear to me how significant this is going to be. Sometimes you kill one of the commanders and, they just have somebody in line to take the place. No big deal. Doesn't change anything. Maybe it signals that the Houthis are making advances in Marib, that they were able to, threaten where this guy, was based or headquartered, or that, he felt the need to go to the front lines and put himself in danger, maybe to rally the troops or something like that. Could just been crazy general want to go stand and, fire a pistol on the front lines. That seems to be, at least in part, what happened to like the Chadian leader Deby, the president there, died fighting on the front lines when there wasn't heavy casualties. This does happen in the world. It's not like every general is Mark Milley or Kenneth McKenzie, who will never in their life be, anywhere more dangerous than like a DC cocktail party or something like that. The Iranian top diplomat in Yemen got COVID and then left the country through the Sanaa airport that was allowed by the Saudis because, they constantly bomb that thing and, could have bombed it if they wanted to. He then died of COVID. There is some report from like the Houthis and the Iranians that they feel that the Saudis prevented the diplomat from being able to leave Yemen sooner. And had he left sooner, he would have been able to survive COVID. Not sure how much of that is true or not, but it does signal that COVID is probably somewhat of a problem right now in Yemen. U.S. isn't concerned about sending any vaccines there, not concerned about sending any food there, nothing. For all the Biden administration cares, that death count could be as high as a million. Doesn't matter to them how many Yemenis are dying. We also have then on December 16th, Saudi Arabia bombing the Yemeni capital of Sanaa again. We have the Houthis, are the Yemeni forces backed by Saudi Arabia claiming to kill 14 Houthis in an ambush in Marib. This was on December 20th. No reports if any Saudi-backed fighters were killed in that skirmish. The Houthis said that there were major air raids, 28 strikes dropped in Marib that day by the Saudis. Saudi Arabia then bombed on December 21st, the day after the Iranian ambassador left Yemen. They bombed the Sanaa airport, and that is preventing aid from getting in through that airport, a critical way to get in aid through that country. Nothing from the Biden administration, no outrage, let the Yemeni children starve to death. Saudi Arabia bombed Sanaa again on December, I believe, 22nd, and then again on December 25th. And in this case, Saudi Arabia also claims that the Houthis fired missiles or drones at Saudi Arabia, and three people were killed in that attack. Not exactly clear if that's true. The Saudis said that their response was large scale. The Houthis report that they killed 18 Yemeni soldiers. Those are backed by Saudi Arabia on December 25th, and that the Saudis had carried out 16 airstrikes in that area. No reports on any Houthi casualties. And I think that wraps us up and brings us up to date on Yemen. So again, it's just absolutely horrible what's happening in Yemen. And there's no attempt at all from the Biden administration, even though they have absolute power to mitigate the suffering of the Yemeni people. There's every reason in the world to do it, even if you don't care about the Yemeni people whatsoever. The fact that the Saudis were spying on UN officials with Israeli spyware should maybe present, problematic to the Biden administration. They want to pry a state that held, and we're going to hold them accountable for the Khashoggi murder. Well, guess what? Khashoggi and his fiance or wife had the spyware on their phone too. So it doesn't really seem to be holding anybody accountable because, again, they're letting the Saudis continue to use that spyware to this time target UN officials. All right, that's where I'll wrap it up. Two of the most important things going on, trying to keep up with what's happening in Yemen and with COVID. COVID, they're coming for our rights. In Yemen, they're coming for everybody in that country. They're willing to kill them all to get what they want. And what they want is capitulation from the Houthis, who, have successfully ruled Yemen for about several years now. The Saudis haven't made any progress. They show no signs of, having lost territory, and in fact are gaining it, if anything. And so unless Biden is, willing to hold MBS accountable and pull the plug on this war, the suffering of the Yemeni people is only going to continue. And, we're going to look back on this as a decade of just disgusting policy by Americans, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Yemenis suffering the consequences from it. All right.